Hello, I'm John Hyatt. Welcome to another family history moment. This time I'd like to talk about some things that I've uncovered in my research on Gilmer side. So I have a whale of a tale for you today. Um, so I think I'll start at the area where we're more familiar with our family. So I'm going to go back to my mother's grandparents. So this is my mom's grandfather. This is Francis or Frank Gilmer. This is Lon Gilmer's father. And he is buried in Gilsville, Georgia. And this is Lon's mother. And her name was Nebraska Smith. She was called Brasky sometimes. And this is the only photo that we have of her. As far as I know, it's the only photo that exists of her. Um, Not a great photo, but it's the only one we've got. So that's Frank and Nebraska Gilmer. And they're both buried in the cemetery in Gilsville, Georgia. So let me go to our family tree here. And so we'll start here at the bottom with Francis and Nebraska, Francis Gilmer and Nebraska Smith. So I want to go to her parents. Nebraska Smith's parents are Ambrose J. Smith. He is also buried in Gilsville. If you go out to Gilsville, you'll see a small tombstone set into the ground that says Ambrose J. Smith. His real name was Ambrose, but I don't know whether he could spell or not, but whoever made his tombstone spelled it Ambrus, but the name is Ambrose, Ambrose Smith. And his wife was Emily Chambers. So Ambrose Smith's father is William L. Smith, and he was married to Charlotte or Lottie Williams. William L. Smith was a Civil War soldier, served in the 52nd Georgia Volunteer Infantry Regiment, and but he was from Rabun County. So after the war, apparently when he returned, he decided to resettle his family in Hall County. And so that's how his son came to be living in the Gilsville area. So he moved from Rabun County to Hall. So his father is Thomas Williams, who married Nancy Davidson. And Thomas Williams' father is named Ethelred Williams. He is apparently referred to as Dred Williams. He actually appears in the census as Dred Williams, but his real name was Ethelred Williams. And he was married to Charlotte Honey. Now, Ethelred Williams' father is Edward Williams, and that's who we want to talk about. Edward Williams was married to Margaret or Peggy Crittenden. So this is at about the time of the American Revolution, and this is a Revolutionary War story. So the story is that Edward Williams was from England. He was an immigrant. and came to the United States in an interesting way. By the way, he is buried in Rabun County at a little place. Actually, it's in Clayton now, but was south of Clayton. There's a place called Chichero. Uh, and there was a post office there, the Chichero Post Office. And the Chichero Baptist Church is located there. And in the Chichero Baptist Church, there is this tombstone, which has the letters EW crudely etched into it. So this is the tombstone of Edward Williams. And this is the tombstone of his wife, Peggy Crittenden, later Peggy Williams. But that's where they lived, at Chichero. Now, some of us have been up to Camp Rainy Mountain near Clayton. So if you're familiar with Camp Rainy Mountain is here, but you go toward the middle of Clayton, and here's Chichero. So just before you would turn onto the road to go to Camp Rainy Mountain, if you turn there, this is Highway 2 or Highway 76. You turn, and Chichero Road is down there, and the Chichero Baptist Church is there. And that's where these two people are buried. So the interesting thing is about Edward Williams. Apparently, originally his name was not Edward Williams. His last name was Cox. And his first name was James or Jimmy. So how did James or Jimmy Cox end up as Edward Williams? Well, he was from Cornwall. And this was around the time of the American Revolution. And the British Army had some unsavory ways of filling out their recruitment and getting people into the British Army. So what they would do is they would come into town and they would beat the drum and they would tell how wonderful it was, to be a soldier in the British Army. And they would pretend to be your best friend, and they would take you down to the pub and they would get a couple of drinks in you. And then after they had you properly lubricated, then they would proceed to offer you the king's shilling. And if you took the king's shilling, then you had been recruited into the British Army. But suppose you didn't want to take the king's shilling. Well, that was no problem. They would just conk you over the back of the head, drag you out of the pub, and the next morning you would wake up on a ship with no way to get back to shore, and you had just been introduced to the British Army. So, according to the story, this is what happened to James or Jimmy Cox. Now, let me say something real quick about the source of this story. This comes from a newspaper article that was printed there in Rabun County. I guess it was a Rabun County or a Clayton newspaper. And so this story was printed about 1903. It told the story of this man's life. So what happened to Mr. Cox was he was unwillingly brought into the British Army, and they made him a drummer. That kind of indicates that he was probably pretty young when this happened. Usually the people who were drummers were fairly young people, probably a teenager. So he was in the British Army, and there was trouble with the colonists in Boston. And so his unit sailed for Massachusetts and participated in trying to put down the rebellion in Massachusetts. However, when Jimmy Cox got off the boat and he began to see the way that the American colonists lived and the freedom and the independence that they had, he decided he would much rather be an American colonist than a drummer in the British Army. And so he deserted. So he ran away, and not only did he run away, but he joined the rebel army. So he was in a Massachusetts regiment. We don't know the number of the regiment or anything like that. It just says it was a Massachusetts regiment. And supposedly he participated with George Washington in the Battle of Princeton. And he was supposedly with George Washington at Valley Forge. I will say that his name, Edward Williams, from Rabun County, Georgia, does appear in the DAR lineage books. So the DAR believes it. So I'm not going to doubt the DAR, but that was the story. Now, when he ran away and joined the British Army, he obviously did not want to be caught as being a British deserter because you know what they did to them? They hung them. So he changed his name. And he changed his name to Edward Williams. And he lived as Edward Williams for the rest of his life. So after the war, I guess he came down to Georgia. He received a Revolutionary War veterans land grant. So the Congress owed all these veterans money, and they couldn't pay. They didn't have the money. So this is the way they settled their debts to the Revolutionary War veterans, is they paid them in land. So he got a land grant from Congress as a Revolutionary War veteran. So that's, I think, more evidence in support of this claim. The other story that's in the newspaper is really interesting, is that he was really an enthusiastic patriot, and he was very proud of American independence. So every July 4th, Edward Williams would get his drum, and he would go to a high hill in the area around Clayton, and he would play his drum. He would play the military rhythms that he learned in the British Army and in the American Army as a drummer, and he would play a drum salute to American independence every July 4th, and he did that for the rest of his life. He lived all the way up until about 1840. He died a very old man of more than 100 years old. So there's another interesting thing also about his wife. His wife, whose name is Peggy or Margaret or Peggy Crittenden, supposedly is a Cherokee Indian. Now, is there proof of that? I don't think so. So the time that they lived, 1840, this is right around the time of the Trail of Tears. There's only one roll of American Indians from around that time. I believe it's called the Henderson Roll. And that was a roll that was sometimes referred to as the Trail of Tears roll. And that roll was taken around the time that the Indians were removed from Georgia. Now, the name Crittenden does appear on those rolls several times. Not her name, because the names that are recorded there are the names of heads of households. So there are several Crittendens in there. Now, usually when this happens, you know, you're wondering, well, why wasn't his name something like, you know, Dragging Canoe, or, you know, Hawk, or, you know, some Cherokee sounding name. Well, a lot of the Cherokees had married white people, American settlers. So Peggy Crittenden, if she was Cherokee, was probably half. But there are Crittendens in that role, so it's possible. Can it be proven? I don't think so. Um, but I'm not going to call him. I'm not going to call the people who wrote this article a liar. So I will believe it until it's proven otherwise. But anyway, that's the story, and it's quite a story, and I think it's a cool one for our family to remember. Thank you. Have a great day.